13 WMAZ Morning starts now.
Ian, a hurricane once again expected to make landfall on the South Carolina coast through the day today. I'll show you what that means for impacts here in Central Georgia.
Hurricane Ian is expected to hit the coast of Georgia today. We were checking on the weather conditions in one of our most outer eastern counties coming up.
Plus, storm impacts on schools here in Central Georgia. We share today's plans and what to expect next.
And why an Atlanta ER will go into total diversion. We break down what that means exactly. Well, good Friday morning. You're taking a live look over, you said, Surfside, South Carolina. Alex, the time is now 6:32 a.m. here on this September the 30th. As you can see, the wind is whipping that camera back and forth. Hurricane Ian is going to be making landfall somewhere around my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina at some point this morning.
Now we are thinking about all those people in Charleston. And Alex, the way the storm has been moving throughout the week, I mean, this could easily have been coming to us.
Yes, the pictures that we're going to see out of Columbia, out of Charlotte, out of central North Carolina could have easily been Central Georgia as we were tracking the storm through the week. But fortunately, it's going to go to the east of us in terms of impacts here in Central Georgia. Not going to be quite as bad. 85 miles per hour is the strength of the storm. A Category 1 hurricane expected to continue moving towards the north, making landfall right along the South Carolina coast, passing the Charlotte area as a tropical storm, weakening down to a tropical depression by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon there in North Carolina. We're dry here in Central Georgia this morning. You don't have to go far to find rain, though. You head over on the other side of the Savannah River, you see some rain. This is going to be a 24-hour loop now of Ian rolling off the Florida peninsula there right over Cape Canaveral there through the open Atlantic waters. The water still obviously very warm, which means it allowed it to intensify into a Category 1 hurricane, and still looking at rain this morning from the North Carolina state line through South Carolina and on down into Georgia as well. We do have a wind advisory here in Central Georgia, gusts up to about 40 miles per hour. That's going to run until about 8 p.m. tonight. A high temperature of about 73, windy once again. Rain chance to the east. I've got gusts of 30 here in Macon. Again, that 40 is to the east. Sunrise is at 7:28. Much more on Ian coming up in a few minutes.
Thank you, Alex. This morning, CBS News confirms at least 6 deaths in Florida already blamed on Hurricane Ian.
Rescue crews across the state continue working to save people who could be trapped in flooded homes and buildings.
People that were surprised by how quickly the storm turned and ended up being trapped.
Well, Ian's massive storm surge ripped away large parts of the Sanibel Causeway, cutting off access to the island by land. The storm made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane this week with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. At FEMA headquarters in D.C., President Joe Biden says as soon as conditions allow, he will visit Florida and Puerto Rico, which got heavily impacted by Hurricane Fiona.
Volunteers from the American Red Cross are stepping up all across the country to help those impacted by Hurricane Ian. Crews from Minnesota and the Dakotas made it down to Florida this week. Many others are either deployed or on standby waiting to help. 3 emergency vehicles came from Fargo, Duluth, and Minneapolis, packed with food and other relief supplies. And many people are already stepping up to help those in Florida who are just now able to survey the damage from Ian. If you would like to help by donating, you can, but you have to be careful. Scammers often create fake charities to take advantage of generous people who just want to help after a disaster. So the Florida Disaster Fund is a safe place for you to donate. You can go to the Volunteer Florida website, volunteerflorida.org/donatefdf. All this information is right here on your screen. You can also donate by texting the word disaster to the number 20222. If you're donating online isn't quite your thing, you can make a check out to the Volunteer Florida Foundation. Include Florida Disaster Fund in your memo line. Mail that check to Volunteer Florida Foundation at 1545 Raymond Deal Road, Suite 250 in Tallahassee, Florida. We are continuing to carefully follow Ian and any potential impacts here in Central Georgia.
Our morning reporter TJ Anthony hopped in the 13 WMAZ Storm Lab and hit the road earlier this morning. He joins us live from Washington County, which is in the eastern part of our viewing area. So TJ, what are you seeing on the ground there? How has Ian impacted schools here in Central Georgia?
Yes, Caitlin, 1A, that's right. You would never be able to tell that just to the east of us, people are preparing for the Hurricane Ian to impact them in areas like Savannah as well as the Carolinas. But people in Washington County did decide to take precautionary measures and go virtual today. Now, it is a little windy, but they are expected to get some rainfall here. And it does feel like fall-like weathers are happening right now. Back to you all in the studio.
Well, thank you so much, TJ. And of course, those winds can still pack a punch and do some good damage when you have those really sustained winds.
Yes, very much so. We know that a lot of school districts that were in our eastern counties did err on the side of caution and, decide to go ahead and, go virtual for today just so they can make sure that their students were safe, because the track of Ian was very uncertain and it's still a bit uncertain. It literally went from Macon all the way up now to Charleston, South Carolina.
I mean, at one point we were talking about going like the Georgia-Alabama line, so schools just wanted to go ahead and be safe. You got to think about those kids at the bus stop. The bus is trying to get out to those places, so even if they don't get a ton of impact from me, I'm just glad they're safe today.
Exactly.
Now, ahead of the storm's impact here, Trudeland County Schools was one of those who decided to close for the day. They don't have any virtual assignments, but they are expected to reopen on Monday. Trudeland County Schools have about 1,000 students all in one building. This houses their elementary, middle, and high schools. Middle and high school principal Brandon Tucker says they're shutting down for safety reasons.
Even though the main hurricane may not hit right here in Soperton, we do know that there could be high winds, could be excessive rain that might cause a problem. Some of our families also live on roads that may not be paved, that may cause a danger for those buses going down the road.
And just like Wanya and I were talking about, better safe than sorry. The football game between Trudeland and Wilcox County did go on as planned last night. Now, we do have a full list of the school schedule changes and school football game schedule changes on our website, 13WMAZ.com. You can find those on our homepage, and we'll continue to update that as we get any new information.
It's now 6:37. Let's get a check of your state headlines. Wellstar announced Atlanta Medical Center will close its emergency room 2 weeks early before the hospital shuts down entirely. Starting Monday morning, the ER will go into total diversion, meaning ambulance drivers will be directed to other ERs. Then on October the 14th at 7 a.m., the ER itself will shut down. The rest of the hospital closes on November the 1st. Wellstar says shutting the ER early helps reduce inpatient volume at the hospital and will minimize the number of patients who may need to transfer out on the 1st. When AMC closes, Grady Memorial Hospital will be the only level 1 trauma center in Atlanta.
Well, right now, 2 teens sit in jail after a burglary at a Macon apartment complex. The Bibb Sheriff's Office says it happened Wednesday at the Autumn Trace Apartments on Rocky Creek Road around 4 o'clock. Bibb deputies saw 2 boys run from the apartment where a burglary was reported. The deputies chased them down. The boys are 15 and 16 years old. The 16-year-old is charged with burglary, obstruction, possession of a firearm during a felony, unlawful possession of a firearm, and theft by receiving stolen property. The 15-year-old is charged with burglary and obstruction. If you have any other information, you can call Macon Regional Crime Stoppers. The number is 1-877-68-CRIME. Again, 1-877-68-CRIME.
A Monroe County deputy is out of the hospital after being dragged by a suspect's car on I-75 South. The Monroe County Sheriff's Office says it happened just before 2 yesterday near mile marker 188. That's when deputies say a traffic stop led to a struggle. The driver tried to speed away, but the deputy held on to the car. He was dragged about 30 feet before falling off. Several other drivers stopped to help that deputy out off the interstate. Meanwhile, the suspect wrecked his Dodge Charger on Rumble Road. So, deputies found 37-year-old Samuel Brown. You see him there of Savannah in the woods nearby. He faces charges this morning of aggravated assault on an officer, marijuana possession, and more.
All right, the time is now 6:39. Ian has already done so much to the state of Florida, and now we have to be concerned about Charleston.
I know, like I'm very worried about my hometown because during high tide, it always floods in downtown, and the way that the storm is coming in and the breeze that's coming in, Alex, it's going to be right during high tide.
Yeah, and there's hurricane warnings up and down the South Carolina coast. It's Charleston, it's going to be Hilton Head. We're looking live in Myrtle Beach right now. Look at the camera shaking there in the wind. Tropical storm force conditions as we head into the morning hours as the storm comes ashore. Let's get the latest on it. Winds of 85 miles an hour. Here we are in Macon. It's not too far away. If you were to draw a line from St. Simons straight out into the Atlantic, you would run straight into the center of the storm. The most intense winds would be right there, right around the center. So that's going to come ashore as we head into the afternoon hours. This icon is 2 p.m. today, and then 2 a.m. tomorrow, a tropical storm crossing into North Carolina, becoming a remnant low over the Virginia mountains, which not great news for them up there either. There's an extensive history of these storms moving towards the north, running into the mountains and raining themselves out and causing a lot of flooding. In and around central Georgia, seeing some cloud cover this morning. You head across the Savannah River, you run into the rain. Here is Ian as we roll into the past, let's see, this is going to be the past 24 hours or so as the rain begins to come ashore. And you can see, I mean, really from Virginia to Georgia is where that rainfall was, and covering almost all the Carolinas, as we're talking about the eastern 2/3 or so. Temperatures here in central Georgia, 64 in Macon, 63 in Warner Robins, 64 in Wrightsville, 65 in Swainsboro, and 57 this morning in Eastman. Areas to the east, we do have a wind advisory. This is going to be Eatonton, Milledgeville, Jeffersonville, Cochrane, Eastman, McRae, and all of the areas to the east, so including Dublin, Wrightsville, Sandersville, where TJ is, and over in Sparta. Also going to be watching that area for potentially a small chance of rain through the day today. Now, the reason why it's so windy is because we've got high pressure towards the north, this hurricane down here to the south, and of course the high pressure spins clockwise, the hurricane spins counterclockwise, and that creates essentially a funnel of air that's being shoved right into central Georgia, and that's why we're getting these wind gusts this high, this far away from the center of the storm, and that's why we're going to continue to see that through the day today. We do have tropical storm warnings in effect from, say, the Kill Devil Hills area there in the Outer Banks all the way down the North Carolina coast, around the South Carolina coast into Georgia, and then up into, say, Columbia over towards Charlotte and Greensboro. These are hurricane warnings for the entire South Carolina coast from Myrtle Beach. That includes Charleston down towards Hilton Head, Beaufort included in that, and Georgetown as well. So as we head through the day today, we are going to be mostly calm here in central Georgia aside from the wind. Going to be watching this rain band to see if it could potentially get into Hancock, Washington, Johnson counties. If that happens, we could potentially pick up, say, a half-inch of rain. It's all dependent on where that center tracks exactly. If that doesn't happen, then it's going to lift away, just rain in Augusta, and not going to feel that in these counties here. Once we get into tomorrow, any rain we do see will be out of here tomorrow morning. Cooler here in central Georgia because the cloud cover will be able to lift out as well, and then warming back into the 80s tomorrow afternoon, a high temperature of about 80. Here's the wind forecast through the day today. Notice that gradient is going to be right there on our far eastern counties. That's why that wind advisory is in effect. But then as the storm lifts towards the north, you saw that circulation shift up into North Carolina. We begin to calm down the winds here in central Georgia. Still on the windy side of things, but not as strong as it's going to be this morning and into the first part of the afternoon. 73 the high temperature today. Rain chance to the east. I've got winds gusting to 30 miles an hour here in Macon. And here's your weekend forecast. Could you ask for anything better? A perfect day to watch some college football and some NFL there on Sunday. Then once we get into next week, of course, October beginning, temperatures in the 70s, actually beginning October on a below average note here in central Georgia.